You got the reputation of being a very numbers man rather than a people's man. I mean, were you honed in on what's objectively measurable rather than the people who are
Well, it's interesting you suggest a numbers man. I really, personally, I don't spend a lot of time with the financials. To me, if one just analyzes financials, it's sort of running a business from the rear view mirror. I mean, the financials are what's already happened.
Yes.
What's most important is to look forward, is what are we doing to survey and understand our customers? What are we doing to develop new products, innovative? What are we doing to develop our employees in terms of training? Those sorts of things. Again, I always talk in terms of the balanced business scorecard because it serves us very, very well. What are we doing to invest in new systems, in productivity, in quality improvement projects, and so on and so forth? So that's what I'm more focused on. I probably don't understand the financials as well as I should.
Okay, that's a well-kept secret in a sense. Tell us a little bit about, the point at which you saw that you were growing your asset book, you're growing your fee-based income, but not necessarily in the way that you wanted to. Some products like mortgages were not as profitable as they should have been. Describe to us that phase, and what was the learning in that process?
I don't know if if I'd call it a phase. I think banking industry in many countries, certainly Singapore, increasingly so in Malaysia, and to some extent in Indonesia, which are our major markets. Right?
Yes.
We're trying to build a business. We are building a business in China as well. But the banking industries in these markets have converged to a great extent. When I say convergence, I'm referring to the fact that there's very little differentiation. So in the eyes of customers, and we learned this very, very early on, in the eyes of customers, banks in Singapore, one to the other, all the same. And if you're all the same, then how do you choose to buy something from that bank? That's price. So increasingly the lack of convergence or lack of differentiation, the problem of convergence, has meant that competition has been price competition. And at one point, I guess it was about 5 years ago when interest rates were low, similar circumstances to now, I told my guys, look, we shouldn't be lending money at, very, very thin, if not zero spreads. It just doesn't make sense. So we backed off the market. We held our market share.
But you had gone into the market first, and
Correct. Well, that was there's kind of a special situation. We expanded our mortgage base when the HDB market, the Housing Development Board market, opened up, and we chose intentionally to try to get a big market share, and we wound up with 50% market share. So we had a big jump in the HDB portfolio, which is about 4 or 5 billion. Singapore dollars. But the private mortgage portfolio was highly, highly competitive, and the spreads were so thin that we backed off, and we were accused of not having a very good franchise by several analysts. We were targeting 15% of any year's revenues to come from new products. So there was an idea to develop new products. But as we saw this problem of lack of differentiation play out and get worse and worse, we concluded that we had to differentiate even further. So that's when we started to redesign the branches. We actually we tried to do as many things as we could to set OCBC apart from our competitors.
How many new customers did you generate as a result?
Well, that's another target, and depends on the segment. I mean, we measure it by segment. The consumer customers has been going up by 3-4% a year for several years now. The SME customer base has been growing much more rapidly, low double digit.
Right.
And so, we measure the number of new customers coming in the door. But I think to get to your point, it's this process. We ultimately concluded that we had to compete on service. We started to work very, very hard on service, which is, partly quality concepts, cross-functional process improvement projects to improve the processes, so that we and measure what we're delivering, so that we get 6 Sigma, zero defect, these concepts, and deliver the right thing to the customer every time. We've been working on quality for this past 7 years, with everybody trained, and significant changes made in the way we run various processes and measure process outcome.
Nothing in your career shows that the service is an element that you perfected for yourself? I mean, in the years that you were at Citi, you were a corporate banker, basically.
Well, actually, we did many of these projects in the corporate bank in Singapore when I was here in the early 90s, and then in India. The reason you choose a project is it's something that customers are complaining about and employees are unhappy about.
And it makes a difference.
And so in India, we were terrible at getting letters of credit out. In some cases, it took us 30, 45 days. And frankly, an issuance of a letter of credit should be same day, right? So one of the projects we did was in India and we got down to, I think it was 2 days, because the regulations in India are somewhat sticky, but it was a major service improvement, and frankly, we went from being worst in class to best in class.
At which point did you decide to bring GE into the bank, and what was it part of? What was the big picture was it part of? And what was the engagement at the board level to get a buy-in to do that?
The question was, is this something that is important to us, or is it something we might divest of? Basically, the conversation was is this something you would ever divest of? And the answer was no, we'd never think about divesting of it. So then, okay, what are you going to do with it? If you're not going to let it go, what are you going to do with it? And so clearly, from my viewpoint, if you're going to make an acquisition that's an easy one. We own 49%. Let's take controlling interest and see what we can do to further integrate the two businesses. But even more important, I mean, the conceptual framework behind it all is wealth management.
Okay.
We had been cooperating with Great Eastern for many, many years, and we're already number one in bank assurance, working with them as an exclusive arrangement. But it became clear to me that with the wealth, the savings rates, the growth rates in GDP, the asset revaluations in Asia, wealth was growing very, very rapidly. And so it was the kernel of the idea was, how do we become much more significant wealth management player? Yeah. But it became very clear to me that wealth management is a significant opportunity in Singapore and around the region. And then the question is, how do you build a business? And if you look at our annual report, most recent, then you'll see systematically building wealth management business. But the securities brokerage business, the structured deposit business, all of them are part and parcel of the wealth management business. So the idea was to say, all right, if wealth management is an important growth opportunity in Asia, then let's be significant players in as many product sets as we can, so manufacture ourselves. And the idea there is we have a complete shelf, asset management through Lion Global, insurance through Great Eastern, securities through OCBC Securities, structured deposits through OCBC created by our own treasury, right? So we've got a complete shelf. If the customer has a risk, position, that aversion or interest in more risk, we've got something for everybody, right?
Were you tied in by the fact that you needed to, use what you already have? Did you look at the Stand Chart model where they see themselves as a supermarket and they sell whatever is possible?
No, it didn't look at Stand Chart. Stand Chart didn't even have several years ago, didn't have a private banking business, if you recall. They got back into it with the purchase of Amex.
But that's the private banking front. But, in terms of funds distribution, for example, it's, the high net worth rather than the private banking.
Well, we decided that what we wanted to do was to be a manufacturer of all wealth management product classes. We decided that we wanted to distribute through as many channels as we could: the bank channel, the brokerage, Remisier channel, the agents channel, and of course the asset management Lion Global distributes through other banks as well, and to institutional investors. And we decided that we wanted to be strong in as many segments as we could be. So we were good at mass affluent,
yes.
Improving in premier, and of course the acquisition of ING Asia's private bank gives us the strength in the private banking.
How well did that acquisition go? How well did the integration go internally? What are the numbers showing you today?
The revenue synergy is something we've always aggressively worked on, right? The cost synergies we've kept fairly, how to put it, we approached it somewhat cautiously. So, we put together telecommunications networks at the very beginning. More recently, we put together data centers, big saves there. Now we're putting together procurement, many, many other things. But it's not a matrixed organization, partly because it is a separate license. It is a licensed insurance company, and the Monetary Authority requires that it has an independent element to the board.
Right. Do you share customers still? I mean, do you share customers with GE?
Of course, yeah.
Today you do, because you are part of the same organization.
Yeah. Well, we have to be careful. I mean, we don't share customer information without customers approving it.
Right.
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 Across legal vehicles, but in most cases, customers are quite comfortable with that.
Right.
So.